The walk with the Dragon Cathay Overhaul brings with it an entire roster's worth of new units. There are lords, heroes, infantry, monsters, and more, so let's take a look at everything and find out if they're any good. As I said, there is a truly massive number of new units in this mod, and whilst all of them have their own strengths and weaknesses, in the sheer interest of valuing both yours and my own time, we're going to speedrun through a lot of these more standard options. So starting with the lords, first up we have Jiang Wang, the Wise Master, and yes, I'm probably going to pronounce a lot of things very wrong, I apologise. This chap is a pretty standard pure spellcaster with access to a strong mix of the Lore of Life and Heavens. His use outside of this is fairly non-existent, so keep him at the back in casting for the most value with the least risk. His Warhorse mount grants him some speed and armour, but he can otherwise be used exactly the same, and his Azure Kirin grants even more speed with a little boost to attack, but still wants to be used the same and to avoid melee at all costs. Zhao Qi, the Moonlight Master, is another pure spellcaster, this time with access to a huge number of spells from the Lore of Life, Beasts, and Yin. Keep him back in casting and avoid any and all actual combat. For his mounts, he has Lu Ji, the Flowing Dawn. This offers him more speed and charge bonus, so technically is better at melee, but I'd still avoid it whenever you can, as the rewards really do not warrant the risk. And a Warhorse. Yunlun the Imperial Gale is another spellcaster, but this one has some melee ability too. On the spell side of things, it's a Lore of Yin. As for her melee abilities, she's a slow moving battler with great melee stats, excellent armor piercing damage with a bonus versus large, but not the most armor. This makes it great for throwing into the middle of your front lines, just keeping out for high damage coming back her way. For her mounts, she has the Jade Longma. This grants her much more speed and flight, along with some armor and a nice boost to charge bonus and damage. She's now a very powerful charging lord with great survivability thanks to the increase in armor. She also has access to Zun Shan, Heaven's Watch. This gives her a little boost to HP and charge bonus, so even better at charging and staying alive. Zhu Ding, the Riverland's Guardian, is a spellcaster with the Lore of Yang and a decent battler with great armor, melee stats and armor piercing magical damage. Game on the front lines, fighting more or less whatever you want and keep the spells coming for tons of value. For his mounts, he has a Warhorse, or Shi Qian, Heaven's Favour. This drops melee stats and charge bonus to gain even more speed from the Warhorse, along with some HP and weapon strength. Still a great battler, though a little worse at staying alive and charging. But you can drop enemy leadership with an area ability, so not a bad trade. The Yellowwind Sage is another Yang caster, but this lad is a large single entity with slightly underwhelming stat cards. He has good armor, decent speed and okay melee stats, especially for something so large, but the weapon strength isn't the most armor piercing, so it will struggle against tougher targets. Still, he has plenty of charge, so at least you'll land with an impact and the spells are still plenty good. Qin Yuan Yi, the Golden Spear, is a lord with no spells, and this guy is a pretty standard frontlines bulwark with heavy armor, decent melee stats, and good but not massively armor piercing damage. He will hold the line just in case love isn't always on time, and keep allies in place whilst he does. He has access to a Warhorse, and Wan Li Yan Yun Zhao, the Boundless Champion. Even more speed and has a nice boost to armor and also has some armor piercing damage, is now a fantastic charging lord with very high damage and great survivability. Qi Yan, the wave breaking admiral, is another line holding lord with high armor, decent melee stats and not much damage. He has access to a Warhorse and a Jade Longma. Yi Xiao, Dragon Gate Commander, is literally the same stat card as Qin Yuan Yi, so the same advice applies. He has access to a Warhorse, a Jade Longma, and a Celestial Lion. This is not as fast or flying as the Longma and drops some melee stats and charge bonus, but gains a nice chunk of armor piercing damage, making him better in sustained melee, but a lot worse at charging. Duan Wei, the Southern Protector, is another fairly standard battling lord, this time with flaming damage and a bonus versus infantry, but still not the most armor piercing. He has access to a Warhorse and a Flowing Fire Jade Lion. This has less speed than the horse, but a lot more damage, especially of the armor-piercing variety. Guan Zimo, the Little Dragonling, is another battling lord, but this time we have some higher speed and armor-piercing damage to spice things up. She hits very damn hard, especially against large, so it makes her an excellent assassin in your armies. She has access to a Warhorse and a 9-colour deer. This has the same speed but more charge bonus and weapon strength than the horse, so now makes her usable as both a charging menace and melee powerhouse in equal parts. Yi Qing, the Horde Queller, is another strong battler with some great armor piercing and bonus versus large, so the same advice as before. You have access to the Warhorse mounts and Mojian, Black String. This just gains a little more charge bonus, so it allows you to use him for charging as well as sustained melee. Xin Zhao, the Jade Immortal, is a very powerful melee battler with great armor, melee stats and armor piercing damage, with the only real downside being the very slow speed. He also has access to a mix of the laws of Yang and Yin, along with a laundry list of powerful abilities, so is quite the multi-use lord. For his mounts, he has a Warhorse, and Chang Sheng Yu, the Everlasting Jade. This drops some speed from the horse in exchange for some more HP. Li Su, the Flying General, hilariously is described as a famed archer and yet has no missiles, and is instead a fairly standard melee lord without a lot of armor piercing. He does have some strong missile abilities, so I guess we're only getting half gaslit. He has a Warhorse, and Ta Lu, Foe Crusher. This drops a little speed from the horse but gains some more charge and armor, so a good trade for more damage and survivability. Yi Shen's the Usurper is another fairly standard frontlines lord without much in the way of armor piercing, but a few abilities to bolster his units. He has a Warhorse, and a Jade Longma. Hu Kuian, Captain of Gatemasters, is back to the Hybrid Lord, and this one is a strong melee battler with great armor, melee stats, and armor piercing damage. He also has access to the Law of Yang, so an all-around powerful lord in all areas. For his mounts, he has Yin Heimer, Silver Steed. This has a lot of speed and charge bonus, so is now a great charging lord, along with being a spellcasting melee powerhouse. Kui Zhao the Forge Master is a passable melee battler without much in the way of armor piercing, with access to the Law of Metal and a bunch of ally boosting abilities. For his mount, he has the Warhorse or the Blazing Bull. This is slower than a horse but has a bit more armor along with some extra charge bonus and a huge boost to armor piercing damage, now great at melee and charging, whichever you prefer. Zhen Kui, the new Martial Marquis, has no spells but is a powerful hybrid weapons lord with great stats in all areas. High armor, good melee stats and high armor piercing damage make her a terror in melee. High range and very strong missile power with lots of flaming armor piercing damage make her a terror from range. She has a Warhorse and Dan 2 Scarlet Rabbit, even more speed and charge bonus than the horse, so adds charging to her already stacked repertoire. Han Cheng, the King of Nanyang, is another fairly straightforward battling lord with good melee stats and armor piercing damage. He has the Warhorse, the Rock Longma, which has slower speed but a greater charge, making for a very powerful charging lord. And Bijie, Demon Bane. Gains a little more speed and drops melee stats and charge bonus to gain a chunk of armor piercing weapon strength, bit of a lateral move here but can also sap enemy leadership, so is a decent enough upgrade. And lastly, Yun Jiang, the Emperor's Chosen. He's an extremely powerful battling lord with crazy armor, melee stats and armor piercing damage, unbreakable and perfect vigor. They have the Warhorse and Shan Wu, Celestial Warrior. Drops a little bit of speed to gain some charge bonus to make him devastating in every area possible. For the heroes, we have the Ritualists. These are very basic spellcasters with no prowess to anything but casting. They have access to a mix of Laws of Life and Yin, making for some pretty impactful spells. For their mounts, they have the Warhorse and the Great Moonbird, which is literally the same as the base unit, but with 8 whole more HP. Nan Natian, the Third Prince, is a very powerful melee battler with good melee stats and very strong armor piercing, flaming, magical damage for a bonus versus large. However, a wee bit of a glass cannon with that low armor, but nothing his high speed can't circumvent. Pei Yu, the Martial Fanatic, is a fairly mid battler with great melee stats but not much armor piercing or armor of his own. He gets much stronger as his own HP drops, so send him in the hopes that he can take out something before he's wiped out completely. The Monkey King is a decent frontlines battler with high armor, decent melee stats and respectable armor piercing damage. Add on his various abilities and he's a frontlines nightmare. The War Masters are very standard frontlines battling heroes with some decent armor piercing damage and survivability. For their mounts you have the Warhorse, the Rock Longma, and the Celestial Lion. Fang Wenzi, the Lunar Strategist, is a pure spellcaster with access to the Law of Heavens and a bunch of abilities to empower both allies and casting. He has a Warhorse, a Wujing War Compass, and Yu Yun, Cloud Strider. This has the highest speed of all the mounts, along with providing a huge boost to melee power, albeit not really improving the armor piercing potential. The speed and flight is great for getting around, but otherwise I'd still be avoiding melee where possible. Li Yueru, the Restless Blade, is a strong frontlines lord with low armor and armor piercing damage, but some decent abilities to empower herself and allies. Tang Ying Yin, the Great Hero, is a very strong melee battler, albeit a bit of a glass cannon with low armor. He has a lot of abilities to empower himself and allies, so is high risk but can be high reward. He can also pick up his Spiritual Arm, which isn't really a mount, but instead gives him his second arm and in doing so a boost to his melee stats. Tong Long, the Shadow Phoenix, is a speedy melee battler with low armor piercing damage and armor, so better suited to weaker threats like assassinating enemy characters that can't really fight back. Yi Yashua, the Master of Incense, can't fight but can provide a range of powerful buffs and debuffs to allies and enemies. She can ride a Warhorse or the Jade Pavilion, but it's basically just her own war drum that keeps her useless in melee but grants her even more buffs for allies. Miao Yi, the Earthshaker, is an extremely powerful melee battler with fantastic stats across the board, so can take on most threats with ease as long as she can catch up to them. She can ride a Warhorse or a Golden Lion. This drops a little speed from the horse in exchange for even more armor piercing damage, so a great trade. Ying Yin, the Dazzling Magistrate, is a mid-lord in terms of individual prowess but comes with a lot of abilities to empower his allies. He can ride a Warhorse or the Heavenly Partridge. This is basically his unique sky junk with slightly improved melee stats, not that that makes any real difference. Kuji the Crow Guard is a powerful hybrid weapons hero with excellent offensive power in melee and very high non-armor piercing poison damage from a range. Melee for the most damage, range for the least risk, so it's up to you. And lastly, the Martial Saint is a very powerful melee battler with great stats across the board with the exception of speed. Get him in the middle of enemies, spam those abilities to death and you are golden. He can ride Qing Yuling, the Jade Spirit. Lots of speed along with charge bonus to cover the only weakness that he had. Now we get into the melee infantry and the actual units, and I'm going to include regiments of renown in with the regular units for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's pretty hard to know which units are which since there are so many additions and the way you access most of them is something other than regular recruitment buildings. There is a great write-up of where to find every single new unit on the mod page, so if you want that info, knock yourself out, but honestly it would be too much work and too long of a video to include it here. Secondly, most of these regiments of renown have larger capacities than your traditional regiments of renown, so the same rules don't really apply. They're more just like special units rather than something that is completely unique and individual. Anyway, starting off the melee infantry, we have the Cathayan warriors. These are kind of like rangers from the High Elves, so pretty weak, but come with some bonus versus infantry, making them decent versus early game chaff front lines, but weak versus everything else. Wujing monks are a deceptively strong early game front lines damage dealer with strong melee stats, bonus versus both large and infantry, and some melee buffs whilst at high leadership. They are pretty fragile, but if you can get them in combat versus low armor, they'll put in a good shift. The steppe heavy warriors have a little more damage than Jade warriors at the cost of a bit of defense and leadership, so if you're looking for more of an offensive focus, they're the unit for you. Great Bastion Wardens are upgraded Jade Halberds with more armor, leadership and attack, and they only get harder to kill as their HP gets lower. Clan Bannermen are like Empire Greatswords with less armor and leadership, otherwise a decent high damage frontlines unit. Clan Guards drop a little attack to gain some defense and a bonus versus large. Still a great unit, just now they focus on taking down larger threats. Dismounted Keshig are back to sword and shields, so very strong defense with some okay non-armor piercing damage. This time they have some limited ammo ranged power for some fairly low flaming damage, but regardless they can soften up their targets before they throw down. Terrestrial Tiger Warriors are pretty similar to Bannermen in the sense that they are powerful great swords units with even stronger damage and lower defense. The Blackshade Battalion are very strong line holders with high armor, defense and a shield, along with decent attack and armor piercing damage. The only downside is their glacial speed, so positioning is key to get good value. The Dragon Order Monks are a low entity count but high damage infantry unit with very respectable melee stats, but sadly not the most armor piercing. Whilst healthy and confident, they are much tougher to kill and their attacks sap enemy resistance and armor to make up for their lack of armor piercing. Imperial Agents are a lower entity count sneaky greatswords unit with very high armor piercing anti-infantry damage and the ability to sap enemy defenses. The Jade-Blood Sorcerers are a fairly low damage and entity count infantry unit with mid-melee stats. However, their true power lies in their abilities, allowing them to empower allies and damage enemies in a variety of creative ways. Ladies of Apricot Grove are a low entity count anti-large unit with lower attack, strong defense and armor piercing magical defense sapping attacks with the added ability to heal nearby allied units. Golden Crow Guardians are a very strong front lines unit with extremely high armor, good defense and excellent armor piercing anti-infantry damage and a disgustingly high attack stat. Add on unbreakable leadership and not much can get past them as long as they don't just go around because that lower speed is pretty dang low. The Imperial Honor Guard are another strong front lines unit with high armor and defense along with decent attack and armor piercing anti-large damage. They're excellent versus large targets but just keeping out for ranged with their lack of shields. The Nanyang Elite Warriors are quite similar to the dismounted Keshig in the sense that they're sword and shields with some limited ammo ranged. In melee they're non-armor piercing but otherwise extremely tough to get rid of, and from a range they deal some decent armor piercing damage to soften up targets before combat. Thousand Oxen Guardians are extremely high damage infantry units with super high armor, great defense, excellent attack and huge armor piercing and sundering damage. Whatever they hit will feel it very hard, so get them on the toughest enemy units that you can. The Celestial Enlightened are the endgame monks of the roster and come with limited entities, but very strong melee stats and damage with armor piercing, flaming, magical, anti-infantry and enlightened fist imbued attacks, which all adds up to make them hit hard against practically anything you put in front of them. The Rat Soldiers are a bit of a weird addition with the decent armor and defense, low attack and non-armor piercing damage along with high speed and low leadership. They're rats, so behave just like you would expect, but this time they're working for Cathay. The New Western Iron Troops are a decent early to mid-game sword and shield unit with decent defense but not the most damage. As long as they get some support, they can do just fine. The Jade Custodian Troops are a strong anti-large line holder with excellent defense, armor and even a shield along with low attack, but decent armor piercing damage with a bonus versus large. They're very hard to get rid of and eat large targets with ease, so keep them well fed for lots of value. The Crow Feather Assassins are very powerful high damage anti-infantry units with excellent defense but a slightly smaller entity count to keep things in check. The White Crested Guard are back to some swords and shields, and these guys are very focused on defense with very high armor and a silver shield and excellent defense. Attack is still good, but damage is not very armor piercing, so they will struggle to do much without support against tougher units. The Guards of the Jade Court have a little more attack, but less defense and charge than the White Crested Guard, but otherwise are very similar in how they perform. These Southern Flame Keepers are once again quite similar, but drop attack and defense to gain some attack and armor piercing damage. Now much more focused on dealing damage than tanking, so feed them infantry to keep them working. The Dragon River Ancestral Monks are another monk unit, this one with decent non-armor piercing damage, but some abilities to summon reinforcements and deal damage to enemies in an area. The Dragon Emperor's Imperial Guard are very elite front lines of huge armor, excellent melee stats, and very strong armor piercing damage with a bonus versus large. They can take on just about anything, so get them to work and watch them rack the value up. And lastly, the Celestial Protectors, also known as the Dragon Emperor's Imperial Guard. These are extremely elite front lines with a very low entity count, stupid high armor, a golden shield, massive melee stats and huge armor piercing damage, so can stay alive and killing for a very, very long time. Moving over to ranged infantry, first up with the Steppe Warriors. These are a lower range bow infantry with a nice bit of early armor piercing damage. They are worthless in melee, so keep them back in shooting from a safe angle for easy value. The Wildland Gunners literally have the same range stats as Empire Handgunners, so you already know how to use them and just how strong they are. Much improved in melee, but literally, who cares? Just get them shooting. The Guards of the Radiance Empress are a pretty mid bow infantry unit with a whole 1 more damage than Jade crossbows, so they're extremely standard. The Dragonstaff Corps are a flamethrower infantry, so need a clean line of sight, otherwise they'll friendly fire like a demon. As long as you can manage that, they're incredible at melting whatever you put in front of them. The Divine Gunnery Division have similar range to Gunners, but nearly double the missile strength, so will hit very damn hard if you can get them line of sight. The Iron Hail Divine Gunnery Division drop a lot of range from the regular division, but gain a lot more armor piercing damage, along with the suppressed effect to slow anything they shoot at. Iron Blossom Whisperers are quite low range but extremely high damage missiles with armor sundering, which makes them excellent at taking out extremely heavily armored targets no problem. The Divine Shock Wardens are a very strong hybrid weapons unit with medium range armor piercing missiles and decent damage in melee. Their melee stats are still on the weaker side, so focus on ranged for as long as you can. The Yin Yang Protectors are another powerful hybrid weapons unit with the same range but more damage and the addition of poison on their missiles. In melee it's more armor piercing, and whilst the melee stats have gone up, still focus on ranged for as long as you can. The Tiger Crown Guard are one more hybrid weapons unit, but more range and less damage than the Protectors. Melee is defensively improved, but otherwise focus on the missiles for as long as you can. The Stormgale Frontier Troops are a medium range, medium damage and medium survivability missile unit with replenishing ammo, so not bad for earlier in the game. Court of the Cleansing Tides are a hybrid weapons unit with medium range, high armor piercing damage and decent damage and defense in melee. I'm not going to say it again because you already know it, but these guys can also choose from a few different forms to optimize their stats for missiles, defense or attacking in melee. The Ninth Wall Gunners are more hybrid weapons this time, but with short range and very high armor piercing damage. Melee is good, and you know the rest by now. And lastly, the Moonlight Templars, and one more time for the people in the back, hybrid weapons, high range, great damage, melee is fine for staying alive, but shoot first, stab later. Next up, the Cavalry and Chariots. First up, the Jade Chariots. These are a decent chariot unit, which means awful in sustained melee, but great at charging if you can handle the micro. The Keshig are a very powerful cav unit with outstanding charge bonus and non-armor piercing damage, not the greatest defense, so keep them charging for the best, safest damage possible. The Gatewood Riders drop a lot of charge bonus from Keshig, but gain a nice boost to defense along with armor piercing damage, making them better in sustained combat versus infantry. Kuai Yin's Will is a very tanky cav without the most damage, but can heal nearby allies, so it works great as a support unit alongside more damage-focused charges. The Iron Pagoda Wardens are a very powerful charging cav with extremely high charge bonus and armor piercing damage. Armor is great but defense is not, so keep them on the move to stay alive. The Grand Northern Cavalry, once again excellent charge bonus and armor piercing damage, melee stats are decent but charging will be better and safer. Storm Riders have extremely high charge bonus and armor piercing damage with exceptionally high speed and flight. They have a bunch of abilities to buff themselves and allies, so send them charging with some friends. And lastly, the Golden Lion Squadron of the Dragon Emperor's Imperial Guard. These are a monstrous cav with respectable speed for something so large, excellent melee stats, fantastic damage and devastating charge. The only wrong way to use these is to not use them, so get them doing something and they'll do great. We also have some new missile cavalry units. These Steppe Horse Archers have the same missile stats as the non-horse variants, but with more ammo and plenty of speed, so a great harassment missile cav. The Line Breakers have more range, more armor piercing missile damage and more survivability, all with the same speed. Nothing not to love, these guys rock. And the Imperial Keyring Archers. Improvements across the board, even with the entity count cut in half, excellent armor piercing missiles with good range, and even excellent charging ability. Shooting is safer, but charging is still great, so it's up to you. Next up, the Monsters and Beasts. The Guardians of Jade are honestly a really solid infantry unit with great armor, strong armor piercing damage, and passable melee stats. Monsters only through classification, by Sigma these infantry are great. We also have the Terracotta Automatons, which are the same but in grey, which drops their damage to gain more defense, so a lot better at staying alive and a lot worse at making sure enemies don't. The Fire Rain Gunnery Crew, whilst they may lack guns themselves, can sure buff nearby units with them. Otherwise, they're a pretty middling Ogre unit, only really good for charging weaker targets, but that makes it pretty hard to buff ranged units, so good luck with that. Lion Warriors are a very high damage monstrous infantry unit with great armor piercing, but not the greatest melee stats. Get them on the flank or embedded in front lines to keep them safe, and hunt anything large you can to make the most of their damage. The Jade Blood Sovereigns are another strong monstrous infantry with a little more defense but lower melee attack, so high damage if you get lucky, but otherwise a very tanky melee monster. Swan Ni are 4 lines similar to the Jade and Jet ones in vanilla, but obviously drop a few stats to account for the increased entity count. Still extremely fast with great armor piercing and attack, but not the greatest survivability. The Ivory Road Ogres are a powerful enough ogre unit with decent melee stats and charge bonus along with some powerful armor piercing damage. Keep them moving and charging and they will rack up value in no time. The Mountain Elders are very elite line warriors with high speed, excellent melee melee stats, decent charge bonus, and exceedingly powerful armor piercing damage. They will wipe out just about any non-anti-large infantry off the map in seconds as long as they don't get picked apart first. Bai Zhang Wang, the White Elephant King, is a very powerful monster with great melee stats, huge armor piercing, and decent speed. Not the most defensively sound with mid armor, but if you can keep it protected, it'll punish shift. Lin Jingji is another powerful monster with a little more of a defensive focus, but still excellent damage potential. Plus, with all these abilities around drinking, it's basically Chen's Storm style from Heroes of the Storm and nowhere else, so that's pretty neat. Marshal Chang Pen, who's just called Canopy, is another great monster with good defense and damage. I know I'm glossing over all these, but they really are all great, and they really are all similar. Zhang Yao, Beheaded. Speaking of which, another similar unit with some tweaks to drop a bunch of stats, but gain a ton of HP. Zhen Li Zhong is the Lord of Thunder. This one can fly and deal great damage whilst not being the toughest with moderate armor. Plus you get a few abilities for some added damage, neato. Du Changguan, Celestial Inspector, has the same flight and speed, but improvements across the board, adding up to decent armor, outstanding attack and damage, and even some pretty great charge. Deals a ton of damage and can keep itself somewhat alive, not bad. Heavenly King Duan Wang is like a souped up terracotta sentinel, adding up to an unbreakable leadership, excellent attack and damage, and halfway decent defense. Has abilities to empower allies in itself, so a pretty great frontlines monster. Heavenly King Shi Peng drops little attack and weapon strength in exchange for some more defense, and now deflects missiles back at their shooters along with calling bombardments onto the battlefield. Heavenly King Wen Shen drops more attack to gain some defense and charge bonus, can now also buff nearby allies and deal some meager damage to enemies with a wind ability. Heavenly King Zhu Fu drops defense to gain speed, attack, weapon strength and charge bonus. Can now deal massive explosive damage to the demons with an ability. Yun Ding Li Shi, the Cloudwalking Giant, is a truly massive unit with stupid damage to go with it. Armor is halfway decent, but even with 15% missile resistance, you need to keep this thing away from missile units because they simply cannot miss. Bai Hu White Tiger is a giant but very fast moving tiger with incredible charge and follow-up damage. It can take out just about anything as long as it doesn't get pinned down and surrounded. Zhuan Wu, Black Tortoise, is a very powerful artillery unit with very high single target damage but limited ammo. Very tough in melee, but with attack that low, it will struggle to land enough hits for this to matter. Zug, the Vermilion Bird, is like a much improved Great Moon Bird with high attack and armor piercing damage along with a halfway decent charge bonus. Has various abilities to deal tons of damage, so is an exceptionally deadly monster if you can find your moments to use them. And lastly, the Rat Captains, which are a decently powerful monstrous infantry units with a lower attack and defense, so need to work with infantry to stay alive whilst they find their shots. We also have the one missile monster and beast, Hu Ji, the Ancient Queen. It's just a Bloodwrack Medusa from the Dark Hills, but with some slightly improved melee stats. Comes with a couple of breath abilities for added damage, otherwise is a great missile monster for focusing down literally anything. The Dragon Arc is not only a new flying war machine unit, it is a very powerful unit with excellent range and missile damage, best used versus infantry to make the use of its scattered volleys. Plus, it can bring all kinds of buffs to nearby units and drop bombs, so what's not to love. And lastly, the Bronze Cannons, which are a one and only artillery unit. The only frame of reference here is the regular cannons, and this has the same range, far less ammo, but a little more damage. It can toggle between arced and direct fire to give you a better firing angle, but this does come at the cost of reducing damage, so is a pretty significant cost. It's a great artillery unit, just choose your shots carefully to make the most of that limited ammo. Now, on sheer numbers alone, this is one of the largest rosters I've ever played, and this is all on top of the campaign aspect, which is incredibly in-depth in its own right. There are so many new units here that you could easily play without touching anything vanilla, provided you knew how to access everything. I think part of what makes this roster so great is how many of these units work on some kind of capacity system. Whether they're regiments of renown you can only get a few of, or only recruitable in limited numbers from certain provinces, almost everything here is quite uncommon, and that makes them feel a lot more special. If you could recruit everything from turn 1, it would still be a lot of cool units, but nowhere near as interesting as what we have. And what we have is a lot of units that look the part and perform just as well. With so many, I really did wonder that there would be some duds, but almost everything here has a place at some point in your campaign. Were I able to survive long enough into my campaign to make use of it all, I no doubt would make use of almost everything here at some point or another because of just how well they've covered the entire spectrum from the early game all the way to the most elite of the elite. There's also variety in the unit types, from regular infantry to hybrid weapons to range to cav to monsters and even the occasional artillery. Even the lords and heroes all have their own little niches that allow them to stay relevant even in your sea of other units. This mod is one of the most impressive packages I've ever seen on the workshop, and you are doing yourself a disservice if you do not try it. Both the campaign and the roster are exceedingly impressive, and it honestly just feels like a huge Cathay DLC. Whether you played them before and didn't vibe or a long-time Cathay enjoyer, this mod makes them so much more fun, so I implore you to download it and give them another try. I can almost guarantee you will not regret it. And you also won't regret checking out this video where I talk about all the campaign side of this mod, which is just as good, if not better, than the roster.